October 20th, 1900, Volume 4. Just as justice wants satisfaction for what is unjust, so does love want the outpouring of its loving and being loved. This morning on coming, my adorable Jesus made me see his attributes, and he said to me, "My daughter, all of my attributes are in continuous attitude for men, and all of them demand their tribute." Then he added, "Just as justice wants satisfaction for what is unjust, so does my love want the outpouring of its loving and being loved. You place yourself inside justice and pray, repair, and when you receive some blow, have the patience to bear it. Then move into my love and give me the outpouring of love. Otherwise I would remain defrauded in love. As for example, this time I feel all the necessity to pour out my constrained love, and if I were not allowed to do it, I would languish and faint." As he was saying this, he began to kiss me, caress me, and make me so many tendernesses of love that I have no words to manifest them. And he wanted me to requite him, saying, "Just as I feel the need to pour myself out with you in love, so do you have the need to pour yourself out in love for me. Isn't it true?" After we poured ourselves out in love with each other, he disappeared. October 20th, 1904, Volume 6. Priests Biting One Another. This morning I found myself outside of myself, in the middle of a road on which there were many little dogs biting one another. And at the head of this road there was a religious who could see them biting one another. He could hear them and was troubled, seeing things with natural sight, while they were talking without deepening and scrutinizing things well, and without a supernatural light that would allow them to know the truth. In the meantime I heard a voice say, "These are all priests who are biting one another." It seemed that religious was a visitor who, as he saw the priests biting, lacked divine assistance. October 20th, 1905, Volume 6. Divine justice converts the fire of sin into fire of chastisement. As I was in my usual state, after I struggled very much, blessed Jesus came for just a little, almost in the act of sending chastisements, and he told me, "My daughter, sin is fire. My justice is fire. Now since my justice must remain always the same, just, always in its operating, without receiving any profane fire into itself, when the fire of sin wants to unite to its own fire, it pours it over the earth, converting it into fire of chastisement." October 20th, 1906, Volume 7. Jesus laments over the state of his ministers. As I was in my usual state, I found myself inside a church in which there were many people attending sacred services. In the meantime, it seemed that by the authority of the government, other people were entering to profane this holy place. Some were jumping, some were using violence, and some were laying hands sacrilegiously on the most holy sacrament and on the priests. On seeing this, I cried and prayed, saying to the Lord, "Do not permit that they arrive at this, profaning your sacred temples, because who knows how many terrible chastisements you would unload upon your creatures because of these horrendous sins." While I was saying this, he told me, "My daughter, the cause of all these enormous crimes, because one sin is the cause and chastisement of making others fall into more sins, have been the sins of priests. They have been the first to profane my holy temple, hiddenly, with sacrilegious masses, and by mixing impure acts in the administration of the sacraments. And under the appearance of holy things, they have reached the point of profaning not only my temples of stone, but of profaning and using violence on my living temples, which are the souls, and of profaning my very body. The secular have somehow perceived all this, and not seeing in them the light necessary for their journey, or rather they have found nothing but darkness, they have been left so clouded as to lose the beautiful light of faith. And without light, it is no wonder that they reach such grave excesses. Therefore pray for priests, that they may be light for the peoples, so that as the light arises again, the secular may acquire life, and may see the errors they commit, and by seeing them, they will feel disgusted to commit these grave excesses, which will be the cause of grave chastisements. October 20th, 1911, Volume 10. Jesus cries and wants to be relieved. New threats to Italy. My adorable Jesus aroused compassion. He was crying very, very much, leaning his face on mine, and I could feel his tears flowing over me. In seeing him cry, I too was crying, and I said, "What is it, O Jesus, that you cry? Oh, please do not cry. I beg you, pour it into me. Let me share in your bitternesses, but do not cry, for I feel I am dying of sorrow." Poor Jesus, what have they done to you? And I caressed him, and I kissed him to soothe his crying. And Jesus, "Ah, my daughter, you do not know what they do to me. If you saw it, you would die of sorrow. And then you say that I must not let the foreigners come. But in what they do, they themselves are snatching the scourge from me. They have snatched from me the scourge of war, they the destruction of cities. Therefore, my daughter, patience. And I, in seeing you cry, I feel my arms being broken, and I am unable to tell you not to do it. I just tell you, take me first, because being in heaven I will think as those of heaven, but while being on earth I will not think as those of heaven, and therefore I feel I cannot resist in seeing all this. It seemed that the sorrow of Jesus and the necessity that someone relieve him were so great that he stayed with me almost for the whole time, and I would now speak to him of love, now repair him, now pray with him. Now I would check his head to see if he had the crown of thorns so as to remove it from him. And Jesus felt like staying. He seemed to let me do everything. The sins that were being committed were so many that he shunned going into the midst of the peoples. Then he poured a little bit of sweet liquor, telling me, "You too need to be cheered." Oh, how good is Jesus! October 20th, 1916, Volume 11. Grace, like sunlight, gives itself to all. I was fusing myself in the divine will, and the thought came to me of commending to it various people in a special way. And blessed Jesus told me, "My daughter, specificity goes by itself, even if you should not place any intention. In the order of grace it happens as in the natural order. The sun gives light to all, Yet not everyone enjoys the same effects. However, this is not because of the sun, but because of creatures. One uses the light of the sun in order to work, to be industrious, to learn, to appreciate things. This one makes herself rich. She constitutes herself and does not go around begging for bread from others. Someone else, then, keeps lazing about. She does not want to meddle in anything. The light of the sun inundates her everywhere, but for her it is useless. She wants to do nothing with it. This one is poor and sickly because sloth produces many evils, physical and moral, and if she feels hungry, she needs to beg for someone else's bread. Now, is the light of the sun perhaps responsible for these two? Or does it give more to one and less to the other? Certainly not. The only difference is that one takes advantage of the light in a special way, while the other does not. Now, the same happens in the order of grace, which, more than light, inundates souls, and now it makes itself all voice to call them, voice to instruct them and to correct them. Now it makes itself fire and burns away from them the things of down here, and with its flames it puts to flight creatures and pleasures from them, and with its burns it forms pains and crosses in order to give to the soul the shape of sanctity it wants from her. Now it makes itself water and purifies her, embellishes her and impregnates her completely with grace. But who is attentive on receiving all these flows of grace? Who corresponds to me? Too few. And then some dare to say that to these I give grace for them to make themselves saints, and to others I do not, almost wanting to hold me responsible, while they content themselves with conducting their lives lazing about as if the light of grace were not there for them. Then he added, "My daughter, I love the creatures so much that I myself have placed myself as sentry of each heart, to watch them, to defend them, and to work their sanctification with my own hands. But to how many bitternesses do they not subject me? Some reject me. Some do not care about me and despise me. Some lament about my surveillance. Some slam the door in my face, rendering my work useless. And I not only placed myself to act as sentry, but on purpose do I choose the souls who live of my will. In fact, since they are present in all of me, I place them with me as a second sentry of each heart. These second sentries console me, repay me for them, and keep me company in the loneliness into which many hearts force me. And they force me not to leave them. Greater grace I could not give to creatures, by giving them these souls who live of my will, who are the portent of portents." October 20th, 1917, Volume 12. The soul can make of herself a host for love of Jesus. Having received my Jesus, I was thinking about how I could give back love for love. It was impossible for me to be able to shrink and become smaller like Jesus does in the host for love of me. This is not in my power, as it is in the power of Jesus. And my beloved Jesus told me, "My daughter, if you cannot shrink all of yourself within the brief circle of a host for love of me, you can very well shrink all of yourself within my will, to be able to form the host of yourself in my will. For every act you do in my will, you will make a host for me, and I will feed myself from you, as you do from me. What forms the host? My own life in it. And what is my will? Isn't it the whole of my life? Therefore you too can become host for love of me. The more acts you do in my will, the more hosts you will form to give back to me love for love. October 20th, 1923, Volume 16. Jesus sows seeds of divine light in the field of the soul, that they may become sons. Then he collects them in order to prepare new seeds, and this causes the soul to feel that everything is over. I felt all annihilated within myself. The privations of Jesus throw me into the most profound humiliation. Without Jesus, I feel the interior of my soul devastated. It seems that all the good declines and dies. My Jesus, how hard is your privation. Oh, how my heart bleeds in seeing that everything dies in me, because the one who is life, and the only one who can give life, is not with me. Then, while I was in this state, my most sweet Jesus came out from within my interior, and placing his hand upon my heart, and pushing strongly on it, he told me, "My daughter, why do you afflict yourself so much? Abandon yourself in me, and let me do. And when it seems to you that everything declines and dies, your Jesus will make everything rise again, but more beautiful and more fecund. You must know that the soul is my field in which I work, sow, and harvest. But my favorite field is the soul who lives in my will. In this field my work is delightful. I do not get covered in mud when I sow, because my will has converted it into a field of light. Its earth is virgin, pure, and celestial, and I amuse myself very much in sowing little lights in it, almost like a dew which forms the sun of my will. Oh, how beautiful it is to see this field of the soul, all covered with many drops of light, which, as they grow, form many suns. This sight is enchanting. All heaven is enraptured at their sight, and they are all attentive on looking at the celestial farmer who cultivates this field with such great mastery, and who possesses a seed so noble as to convert it into a son. Now, my daughter, this field is mine, and I do whatever I want with it. Once these sons have formed, I collect them, and I take them to heaven as the most beautiful conquest of my will, and then I go back to the work of my field. So, I put everything upside down, and the little daughter of my will feels that everything is over, everything is dying. She sees those suns, so refulgent, being substituted by the drops of light which I am sowing, and she thinks that everything is perishing. How you deceive yourself! This is the new harvest that must be prepared. And since I want to make it more beautiful than the first one, and make it larger in order to double my harvest, at first sight it seems that the work is more difficult, and the soul suffers more. But those pains are like strokes of a hoe into the earth, which push the seed deeper down in order to make it sprout more safely, with greater fecundity and beauty. Don't you see when a field is harvested how desolate and poor it remains? But it lets itself be sowed again, and you will see it more beautiful than before. Therefore let me do, and you, by living in my will always be at work with me. We will sow the little drops of light together, and we will compete to see who sows more. So we will amuse ourselves now in sowing, now in resting, but always together. I know what your strongest concern is, that I may leave you. No, I will not leave you. One who lives in my will is inseparable from me. And my Jesus, you told me that when you did not come, it was because you wanted to chastise people. And now it is not because of this that you don't come, but for something else? And Jesus, as though sighing, they will come. The chastisements will come. Ah, if you knew. And having said this, he disappeared. October 20th, 1927, Volume 23. How created powers can neither embrace nor exhaust the uncreated power. Not even the Virgin, or the very humanity of our Lord. How the divine will possesses the incessant and ever new act, and has the virtue of doing ever new things. Example. How it awaits its kingdom in order to communicate this new act as the fulfillment of its glory. I continue what is written above. So I thought to myself, my beloved Jesus says that only when his divine will is known on earth and its kingdom is formed, and the children of this kingdom take their place in the celestial fatherland, a place reserved only for them, then will his glory on the part of creation and the glory of all the blessed be complete. And I thought, in heaven there is the sovereign queen, who had all the fullness of the life of the divine will, such that no one, I believe, will be able to reach her. Why then is the glory of God on the part of creation not complete? And many other doubts and thoughts came to me that it is not necessary to put on paper. I will only say what Jesus told me. My daughter, you are too little, and you measure with your littleness the endless greatness and my unreachable wisdom. As holy as the creature might be, as was my beloved mother, even though she possesses all the fullness and totality of all the goods of her Creator, and the kingdom of my divine will had its full dominion in her, in spite of this, she could not exhaust all the immensity of the goods of the divine being. She filled herself to the brim. She overflowed outside to the extent of forming seas around herself. But to restrict within herself, to embrace all that the Supreme Being contains, this was impossible for her. Not even my humanity could enclose by itself alone all the immensity of the creative light. I was completely filled with it, inside and out. But oh, how much of it remained outside of me, as the circle of my humanity did not have an equivalent magnitude in which to enclose a light so endless. The reason for this is that created powers, of whatever kind they might be, cannot exhaust the uncreated power, nor embrace it and restrict it within themselves. The height of the Queen of Heaven, and even my very humanity, found herself with her Creator in the same conditions as you may find yourself in if you expose yourself to the rays of the sun. You may find yourself under the empire of its light, be invested by it, feel all the intensity of its heat, but being able to restrict within and upon yourself all of its light and heat, this will be impossible for you. However, in spite of this, you cannot say that the life of the light of the sun and of its heat is not in you and outside of you. Now you must know that our divine being, our creative will, possesses its incessant and ever new motion, new in the joys, in the happiness, new in the beauty, new in the crafting that our wisdom puts out in the formation of souls, new in the sanctity it impresses, new in the love it infuses. Therefore, because it possesses this continuous new act, it has the virtue of doing ever new things. And if the Queen Mamma was made all beautiful, pure, and holy, this does not exclude that we can do more new and beautiful things worthy of our works. More so since, in creation, as our divine Fiat came out into the field in creating all things, it also put out into the field all the new acts with which it was to form the creatures, the rarities of beauty it was to communicate, and the sanctity it was to impress in those who would live in our divine will. And since our will did not have life in the creatures, nor did it have its kingdom, it only had it in the sovereign Queen of Heaven, and so it made the first prodigy and miracle that astonished heaven and earth. It awaits the other creatures who are to possess its life and form more of its kingdoms in which to reign, so that we may form, with our new act, more rarities of sanctity, of beauty, and of grace. Oh, how my divine will anxiously awaits this, its field of action, to issue these new acts. My will is like an artisan who knows how to make hundreds and thousands of statues, one different from the other. He knows how to impress in them such finesse and rarity of beauty, of postures, of shapes, though none of them can be said to be like any of the others. He does not know how to do repetitions, but always new and beautiful statues. However, it is not given to him to put out all of his art. What sorrow would his inactivity be for such an artisan? Such is my divine will, and this is why it awaits its kingdom in the midst of creatures, so as to form rarities of divine beauty in them never before seen, sanctities unheard of, novelties never before touched. It is not enough for its power that can do anything, for its immensity that embraces everything, for its love that is never exhausted, to have formed, with its divine arts, the great lady, the Queen of heaven and earth. But it wants her retinue, in which my Fiat wants to live and reign alone, in order to form more works worthy of itself. How then can our glory on the part of creation and the glory and happiness of the human family be complete, if our work is not fulfilled in creation? The most beautiful statues, the most important works, are still to be made. The purpose for which creation was created is not realized nor fulfilled, and it is enough for a work to be lacking at one point, one tiny little flower, one leaf, one shade, that it cannot have all its value, nor can the one who formed that work earn complete glory. More so, since in the work of our creation, it is not just one point that is lacking, but the most important things, our varied divine images of beauties, of sanctity, of perfect likeness to ourselves. And just as our will began the work of creation with such great sumptuousness of beauties, of order, of harmony, of magnificence, both in forming the machine of the whole universe and in creating man, so it is right, for the decorum, glory, and honor of our work, that it be fulfilled with yet greater sumptuousness and diversity of rare beauties, all worthy of the incessant and new act that my divine will possesses. Those who will live in its kingdom will be under the power of a new act, of an irresistible and continuous force, such that they will feel invested with a new act of sanctity, of dazzling beauty, of most refulgent light, and while they possess this act, a new one will arrive, and then one more, without ever ceasing. Amazed, they themselves will say, "How holy, beautiful, rich, strong, happy is our Fiat thrice holy, that is never exhausted." It always has sanctity to give us, beauties with which to embellish us evermore, new strengths to make us stronger, and new happinesses, such that the first is not similar to the second, or to the third, or to any of the others it will give us. These fortunate creatures will be the true triumph of the divine fiat, the most beautiful ornament of all creation, the most refulgent suns that will cover with their light the void of those who have not lived in its kingdom. Now my inseparable mamma, who possesses this new and continuous act as her own life, that was communicated to her by my divine will, because she lived life in it, is the first, most refulgent sun that my volition formed in her, and she occupies the first place of queen, and gladdens the whole celestial court, making her light, her joys, her beauty be reflected in all the blessed. But she knows that she did not exhaust all the new and incessant acts that my divine will has established to give to creatures, because it is inexhaustible, and oh, how many more it has! And she awaits that more suns be formed from this, its new act of new beauties and of rare beauty. And as true mother, she wants to be surrounded by all these suns, that they may reflect themselves in one another and delight one another, and the whole celestial court may receive not only her own reflections, but those of all these suns, as the fulfillment for all of the glory of the work of the creation of her Creator. As queen she awaits with great love the properties of my will in the creatures, that are as though her own, for she was the first to form the kingdom of my divine will within herself. Suppose that, instead of one sun, more suns were formed in the vault of the heavens, new in beauty and in light. Would the vault of the heavens not appear as more beautiful and more adorned? It certainly would. And would these suns not reflect themselves as light in one another? And would all the inhabitants of the earth not receive the reflections, the goods of all these suns? So it will be in heaven. More so, since those who have possessed the kingdom of the supreme fiat on earth will have endless goods in common, because one is the will that has dominated them. This is why, even though in heaven there is the sovereign empress who possesses the fullness of the life of my divine volition, our glory on the part of creation is not complete. First, because our will is not known among creatures, and therefore it is neither loved nor longed for. Second, because not being known, it cannot give what it has established to give, and therefore it cannot form the many rarities of works that it knows how to do and can do, while once a work is complete, one sings victory and glory. October 20th, 1931, Volume 29, Encounters of Steps Between God and the Creature. How God has formed the creature as center of creation. My little existence always goes around in the holy divine volition. I feel that it draws me ever more to itself, and each of its words, light or knowledge of it, is a new life that it infuses in me, an unusual joy that I experience, and a happiness without end, such that, unable to contain it because I am too small, I feel as if my heart wanted to burst with joy and with divine happiness. O divine will, make yourself known, possessed, and loved, so that all may be happy, but of celestial happiness, not terrestrial. But while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus, making his little visit, told me, "My daughter, for each act that you do in my divine will, so many steps you take toward God, and God takes his steps toward you. The step of the creature is the call that moves the divine step to go to meet her. And since we never let ourselves be beaten or surpassed by her acts, if she takes one step, we take 5, 10, because our love, being greater than her own, hastens, multiplies the steps to make the encounter sooner and dive one into the other. Even more, many times it is we who move the step in order to call the step of the creature to come to us. We want our creature. We want to give her something of our own. We want her to resemble us. We want to render her happy, and therefore we tread the step to call her. And one who is in our will, oh, how she hears the sweet treading of our steps and runs to come to us, to receive the fruits of our steps. But do you want to know what these fruits are? Our creative word. As soon as the encounter takes place, the creature flings herself into the center of our supreme being. We receive her with so much love that, unable to contain it, we identify her with us, and with our word we pour out our knowledges upon her, making her share in our divine being. So each word of ours is an outpouring that we make upon the creature, and as many degrees of knowledge as she acquires by means of our word, so many more degrees of participation she receives from her Creator. See, then, each act done in my divine will is the way that you form for yourself to move the step in order to form yourself all of divine will. And my word will serve you as formation, as light, and as participation in our divinity. After this, my abandonment in the divine fiat continued, and my beloved Jesus added, "My little daughter of my will, you must know that the only purpose of creation was our love, that manifesting itself outside of us, formed its center, in which, by manifesting itself, it was to centralize itself in order to carry out the purpose for which our love had come out of us. So, our center was the creature, in whom, as our love would fix itself, we were to make her feel our life palpitating and our love operating in her. And the whole of creation was to be the circumference of this center, almost like solar rays that were to surround, embellish, sustain this center, that, fixing itself in us, was to give us the feel to manifest ever new love, so as to render more beautiful, more rich, more majestic the center where our love leaned, to make of it a work worthy of our creative hands. Now all creatures were to form, united together, the place of center of our manifested love, but many scattered from the center, and our love remained suspended. It had no place in which to fix itself in order to centralize itself, to have its primary purpose, the reason for which it had come out. So the order of our wisdom, the operating life of our manifested love, could not tolerate the failure of our purpose. This is why, in all centuries, there has always been some soul whom God has formed as center of the whole creation, and within her our love leaned, and our life palpitated and obtained the purpose of the whole creation. It is by means of these centers that the whole creation is maintained, and that the world still exists. Otherwise it would have no reason to exist, because the life and the cause of everything would be missing. Therefore there has not been one century, nor will there be, in which we will not choose souls dear to us, more or less portentous, who will form the center of creation, in whom we will have our life palpitating and our love operating. And according to the epochs, the times, the needs, the circumstances, they have been offered for the good of all. They have given themselves to all. They have defended all. They alone have been the ones who have sustained my sacrosanct rights, and have given me the field to maintain the order of my infinite wisdom. Now you must know that these souls have been chosen by our divine being in each century as center of all creation, according to what we wanted, the good that we wanted to do, and what we wanted to make known, and also according to the needs of the scattered centers. And this is the reason for the diversity in their ways, in the speaking, and in the good that they have done. But the whole substance of these souls was my life palpitating, and my love manifested, leaning, and operating in them. Now, in this century, we have chosen you as center of all creation, to do the great good of making known with more clarity what it means to do our will, so that all might long for it, and call it to reign in their midst. And in this way the scattered centers might unite to the only center, and form a single one. Creation is a birth come out of the power of my divine will, and it is just and necessary that all recognize who this mother is, who with so much love has delivered them and issued them to the light of day, so that all of her children would live united together with the will of their mother. And having one single will, it would turn out easy to form one single center, in which this celestial mother would make our divine life and our operating love palpitate. More so since the predominant vice of this century, the idol of many, is the human will, and even in the very good that they do. And this is why one sees that many defects and sins come out from within that good. This says that the font by which it was animated was not pure, but corrupt, because true good knows how to produce good fruits, and from this it can be known whether the good that is done is true or false. Therefore there is an extreme necessity to make known my divine will, bond of union, powerful weapon of peace, beneficial restorer of the human society. October 20th, 1935, Volume 33. Love and the divine will are on par with each other. Love forms the prime adaptable material in order to form the life of God in the creature. My poor mind feels the need of resting in the divine volition, of feeling itself loved by the one who alone knows how to love it. It feels life in him and the greatest happiness with his sweet company. But while it feels the need of being loved, it feels the ardent fever to love him, and would want to be consumed with love, to come forth from the exile in order to be able to love with perfect love in heaven. My Jesus, when will you have compassion on me? But while I thought this, my beloved Jesus, repeating his brief little visit, told me, "My daughter, love and will of God are on par with each other. They never separate, and they form one single life. In fact, my will created, operated so many things, but it created and operated loving. Nor would it have been works worthy of our infinite wisdom if we did not love what had been created by us. Therefore every created thing, even the littlest, possesses the source of our love. And it has a sigh, a heartbeat, a continuous voice. Love. I am divine will, and I am holy, pure, powerful, beautiful. I am love, and I love, nor will I ever cease loving, insofar as everything is not converted into love. See, therefore, my daughter, my divine will first loved, and then it created what it loved. Love is our breath, our heartbeat, our air. And since air is communicative and there is no person or thing that can flee from air, so our love, true air, invests everyone, loves everyone, and everything. With right, it wants to lord over everything, and it wants to be loved by everyone. And it feels taken away from it the breath, the heartbeat, the air, the life, when it is not loved, and they hinder its communicative virtue. Now, if the creature does my will and she does not love, one cannot say with deeds that she does my will. Perhaps it will be will of God by circumstance, by necessity, by time, because only the divine love has the unitive force that unites and centralizes everything in my divine will in order to form life. Then, lacking my love that alone knows how to render and transmute the creature into adaptable material, in order to form of her the life of the divine will, she would be like a hard object that cannot receive any impression of the Supreme Being. And my love that, like cement, can fill all the wounds of the human volition, renders her moldable in a way that it can give the form that it wants, and imprint itself as seal of the divine life. Therefore, will of God and love are inseparable. If you will do my will, you will love, and if you love, you place my will in safety in you. The one and the other give each other a hand. My will creates. Love lends itself as material in order to undergo the creating act, so as to put forth our most beautiful works. Therefore, when we are not loved, we become delirious. We feel our arms broken. Our creative hands do not find the material in order to form our life in the creature. So we run together in loving each other. We always love, and we are both happy. Rather, if you will live in my volition, I will place my love at your disposition, and you will have in your power heroic and incessant love that never says enough. End of October 20th. Fiat.